The morning sun cast long shadows across the Miami cruise terminal as I stood with my parents and siblings, watching the massive Ocean Princess gleam white against the turquoise waters of Biscayne Bay. At over 1,000 feet long and carrying 4,200 passengers, she was one of the newest and most luxurious ships in the world, though my family had no idea just how personally connected I was to this particular vessel. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this," Mom said, clutching Dad's arm as she stared up at the ship's towering decks. Patricia Hawkins had been dreaming of a luxury cruise for their 25th wedding anniversary for months, and Dad had finally surprised her with this week-long Caribbean voyage. 25 years deserve something special," Dad replied, kissing her temple. Robert Hawkins owned a small accounting firm in suburban Cleveland, and while they were comfortable, a luxury cruise was definitely a splurge for their family. My older brother Jason adjusted his designer sunglasses and checked his Rolex. "I have to say, Dad, you really outdid yourself. The Ocean Princess is supposed to be incredible. 5-star dining, Broadway-style shows, that infinity pool on Deck 12. And the spa," added my sister-in-law Monica, practically glowing with excitement. "I've already booked us for couples massages tomorrow." My younger sister Kelly was taking selfies with the ship in the background. "This is going to be the best Instagram content ever. #luxury cruise, #family vacation, #blessed." I stood slightly apart from the group, wearing simple jeans and a white blouse, carrying a small duffel bag that looked decidedly modest compared to my family's matching set of expensive luggage. At 27 I was the middle child, and lately, it felt like I was invisible to them most of the time. "All right, everyone," Dad announced, pulling out the boarding passes. "Let's get checked in. I want to explore the ship before we set sail." We walked toward the terminal entrance and I fell into step behind my siblings. That's when Mom turned around and held up her hand like a traffic cop. "Actually, Jessica, I need to talk to you." I stopped walking. "What's wrong?" Mom exchanged glances with Dad, then looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sweetheart, your father and I have been discussing this, and we've decided that this cruise should be family only." "I'm sorry, what?" I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "This is our anniversary celebration," Dad explained, his voice gentle but firm. "It's a time for us to celebrate with our children who have achieved something meaningful in their lives." Jason stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but not disagreeing. "Jess, you know we love you, but this trip is expensive. Mom and Dad are paying for all of us, and it feels wrong to include someone who isn't really contributing to the family success story." "Contributing to the family success story?" I repeated slowly. Monica nodded sympathetically. "We know you're still figuring things out with your computer thing, but maybe this will motivate you to get serious about your career." "My computer thing?" Kelly looked up from her phone. "Come on, Jess. You live in that tiny apartment, you drive a car that's older than I am, you never go out or buy nice clothes. It's embarrassing when people ask what you do and we have to say you're, what is it again? A freelance something." "Software consultant," I said quietly. "Right," Mom said. "And I'm sure that's very nice for you, but this cruise is about celebrating real achievements. Jason just made partner at his law firm, Kelly graduated summa cum laude and got into graduate school, and your father and I have built a successful business." "And what have I built?" I asked. "Well," Dad hesitated. "I'm sure you're working very hard, Princess. But working hard and achieving success aren't always the same thing." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around at my family, these people who had raised me, supported me through college, and who I loved deeply, and realized they had absolutely no idea who I'd become. "You know what?" Mom said, reaching into her purse. "Here's $300. Treat yourself to a nice weekend in Miami. Go shopping, see some sights, relax. When we get back from the cruise, maybe we can all sit down and discuss some more practical career options for you." "Practical career options. There's no shame in changing direction," Jason added. "I can help you put together a resume, maybe get you an interview at a corporate firm. Entry level, but with benefits and a steady paycheck." "Entry level," I echoed. Kelly was already walking toward the boarding area. "We need to go. They're starting the priority boarding for suite guests." "Suite guests." I looked at the boarding passes in Dad's hand. "You booked suites. Jason helped us upgrade," Mom explained proudly. 2 adjoining luxury suites with balconies. "We figured if we're going to celebrate 25 years, we should do it right." This cruise is family only, you can catch the next one, Mom said, giving me a quick hug. Have fun in Miami, sweetheart. We'll see you next week. And just like that, they walked away from me. I stood on the dock watching my family disappear into the boarding terminal, feeling like I'd just been punched in the stomach. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Captain Rodriguez? It's Jessica Hawkins. My family just boarded. Sir, they have no idea. No, I think I'll wait for the welcome message. Let them get settled first. Yes, sir, I'll be up to the bridge in about an hour. I ended the call and looked up at the Ocean Princess, my ship, my investment, my pride and joy. The ship that had cost me $2.8 billion to design, build and launch as the flagship of my maritime enterprises fleet. The ship that my family was about to discover belonged to the daughter they'd just left on the dock. 30 minutes later, I was in the ship's executive elevator, rising to the command bridge. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Miami's skyline receding as we headed toward open water. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. All passengers are aboard. Ready for the welcome message? I smiled and typed back, send it. Throughout the ship, every screen in staterooms, restaurants, bars, the atrium, even the elevators flickered to life with my company's logo. Then my face appeared, wearing a crisp white captain's jacket with the Maritime Enterprises insignia. Good afternoon and welcome aboard the Ocean Princess, my recorded voice echoed through the ship's sound system. I'm Jessica Hawkins, CEO and founder of Maritime Enterprises, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the newest and most luxurious ship in our fleet. I imagined my family's faces as they heard my voice and saw my image on the screens in their luxury suites. The Ocean Princess represents the culmination of 5 years of design, engineering and construction, bringing together the finest amenities and service standards in the cruise industry. Our crew of 1,800 dedicated professionals is here to ensure that your voyage exceeds every expectation. My phone was already ringing. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Over the next 7 days, you'll experience destinations throughout the Caribbean while enjoying world-class dining, entertainment, and accommodations. As the founder of Maritime Enterprises, I'm personally committed to making sure every detail of your cruise is perfect. The phone rang again. This time it was Jason. Then Kelly. Then Dad. I ignored them all. From our partnership with Michelin-starred chefs to our exclusive excursions and our industry-leading environmental initiatives, the Ocean Princess represents our commitment to redefining luxury travel. Thank you for choosing Maritime Enterprises and I hope you enjoy your voyage. The message ended, and the screens returned to their regular programming showing ship activities and deck plans. I walked out onto the bridge wing and looked down at the passenger decks below, where I could see hundreds of people gathered around the pools and promenades, many of them still buzzing about the CEO's welcome message. Ms. Hawkins, Captain Rodriguez approached with a slight smile. I believe your family is trying to reach you. I imagine they are. I pulled out my phone, which showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. Has anyone from my party tried to contact the bridge? Your father called the guest services desk asking to speak with the captain about an urgent family matter. I told them I was busy with departure procedures but could schedule a meeting later this afternoon. Perfect. Let's give them a few hours to process this. I spent the next several hours working in my private office adjacent to the bridge, reviewing operational reports and checking in with my other properties. Maritime Enterprises wasn't just cruise ships. We owned a fleet of luxury vessels, 5 private island resorts, and a network of high-end travel services that catered to ultra-wealthy clients worldwide. The business had started almost by accident. During my junior year at MIT, I developed a logistics optimization algorithm for my computer science thesis. What began as an academic project evolved into software that could dramatically improve efficiency for complex transportation networks. I'd licensed it to several shipping companies, then reinvested the profits into acquiring distressed maritime assets during the 2019 industry downturn. By the time I graduated, I owned 3 cargo ships and a small passenger ferry. 5 years later, Maritime Enterprises operated the largest privately owned luxury cruise line in the world, with 8 ships and annual revenues exceeding $4.2 billion. But my family knew none of this. To them, I was still the quiet middle child who worked with computers and lived modestly in a small apartment. They had no idea that the small apartment, was actually a 3,000 square foot penthouse in Manhattan's most exclusive building, or that I kept my lifestyle simple because I preferred privacy to ostentation. Around 6 p.m. as we sailed through calm seas toward our first port of call in Cozumel, Captain Rodriguez knocked on my office door. "Ms. Hawkins? Your father is at guest services again. He's quite insistent about speaking with someone in authority about his daughter." His daughter the CEO, or his daughter the failed computer consultant? He didn't specify, but he seems rather agitated. I checked my reflection in the office mirror and straightened my jacket. I think it's time for a family reunion. The guest services desk was located in the ship's main atrium, a soaring space filled with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that rose 6 decks through the heart of the ship. As I approached, I could see my entire family clustered around the mahogany service counter, all talking at once to the clearly overwhelmed guest relations manager. "There has to be some mistake," Dad was saying, his voice carrying across the atrium. "My daughter doesn't own anything. She's a struggling computer freelancer who lives paycheck to paycheck." "Sir," the guest relations manager replied patiently, "I can only tell you what our records show. Jessica Hawkins is listed as the CEO and majority shareholder of Maritime Enterprises." "That's impossible," Jason interjected. "I'm a corporate lawyer. I know what it takes to build a company like this. My sister doesn't have that kind of background or capital. Or education," Monica added. "You need an MBA from a top business school, years of maritime industry experience, connections with shipbuilders and financing partners." Kelly was frantically typing on her phone. "I'm Googling her right now. Jessica Hawkins, Maritime Enterprises. Oh my God. What?" Mom grabbed Kelly's phone and stared at the screen. "Forbes 30 under 30. Youngest person to launch a luxury cruise line. Net worth estimated at $6.2 billion. $6.2 billion? Dad's voice cracked. "That can't be right." "With AB," I said quietly, stepping up behind them. They all turned around at once, and the expressions on their faces were exactly what I'd expected: shock, confusion, and dawning realization. "Jessica," Mom whispered. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," I said simply. "This is my ship." Silence fell over the group, broken only by the soft piano music playing from the atrium bar and the distant sound of waves against the hull. "Your ship," Jason repeated slowly. "My ship. My company. My $6.2 billion maritime empire that you all seem to have just discovered." But how?" Dad stammered. "You're 27 years old. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a Honda." "I live simply because I value privacy. I drive a Honda because it's reliable and doesn't attract attention. And I'm 27 years old because I started building this company when I was 22. Monica was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "You said you were a software consultant." I said I work with software. Maritime logistics optimization specifically. The algorithm I developed in college revolutionized shipping efficiency. I licensed it, then used the profits to acquire ships. "Ships," Kelly said faintly. "Plural. 8 cruise ships, 47 cargo vessels, and 5 private islands. Plus the supporting infrastructure, ports, terminals, maintenance facilities, corporate headquarters in Miami, New York, and Monaco." "Monaco," Mom echoed. "I also own the hotel where you stayed last night in Miami. The Meridian Grand? That's one of mine too." The guest relations manager was watching this exchange with obvious fascination, probably wondering if he should intervene or just enjoy the drama unfolding at his desk. "I don't understand," Dad said, sinking into one of the atrium's leather chairs. If you have all this, why didn't you tell us?" "When?" I asked. "When you told me I needed to get serious about my career. When you suggested I work as Jason's paralegal. When you offered me money to go shopping in Miami because you assumed I couldn't afford decent clothes." "We were trying to help," Mom said weakly. "You were trying to fix what you perceived as my failure. You never asked about my work, never showed interest in what I was building. You just assumed that because I didn't live the way you expected a successful person to live, I must be struggling." Jason was scrolling through his phone now, reading what appeared to be news articles. "Forbes calls you the most innovative young entrepreneur in the travel industry. There's a profile in Fortune about your environmental initiatives. You spoke at the World Economic Forum last year. The World Economic Forum, I confirmed. You told us you were going to a computer conference in Switzerland. Technically accurate. There were lots of computers at Davos. Kelly looked up from her own frantic Googling. You own islands? Like actual tropical islands. 5 of them. Private resort destinations for ultra-high net worth clients. The kind of people who want complete privacy and unlimited luxury. And this ship. Dad gestured around the opulent atrium. Cost $2.8 billion to build. Took 4 years from initial design to launch. She's the most advanced cruise ship in the world, completely carbon neutral, revolutionary waste management systems, the first ship to achieve zero ocean pollution certification. You built a carbon-neutral cruise ship? Mom asked, and for the first time I heard something other than shock in her voice. Something that might have been pride. I built 8 of them. The cruise industry has a terrible environmental record, so I decided to change that. Every ship in my fleet runs on renewable energy and advanced biofuels. We've partnered with ocean conservation groups to actually improve marine ecosystems along our routes. That's incredible, Mom said softly. It's also profitable. Sustainable luxury is the future of travel. We're booked solid for the next 3 years. The atrium had filled with other passengers during our conversation, many of whom were clearly eavesdropping on what had become a very public family drama. I noticed several people taking photos with their phones. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, I suggested. Captain Rodriguez has offered us the use of his private dining room. 20 minutes later, we were seated around an elegant table in the captain's quarters, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the Caribbean sunset. Captain Rodriguez had excused himself after introducing us to the ship's sommelier, who'd provided a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. So, Dad said, breaking the awkward silence, our daughter owns this ship. Among other things. And we left you on the dock because we thought you weren't successful enough to join our family celebration. That's an accurate summary. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared out at the ocean. I'm so sorry, Jessica. We're all so sorry. For what? For not seeing what you'd accomplished. For treating you like you were failing when you were actually building an empire. You weren't supposed to see it, I said gently. I worked very hard to keep my business life separate from my family life. But why? Jason asked. Why hide something this incredible? I considered the question, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I've achieved. Because I wanted to build something that was completely mine, without anyone being able to say I succeeded because of family connections or help. We don't have connections in the maritime industry, Kelly pointed out. Exactly. Which is why I knew that whatever I built would be entirely my own accomplishment. But you let us think you were struggling, Dad said. You let us worry about you. Did you worry about me because you thought I was poor, or did you worry about me because you thought I was unhappy? Both, Mom admitted. Well, I'm not poor. And I'm incredibly happy. I love what I do, I love the challenges it presents, and I love knowing that my work is making the travel industry more sustainable and responsible. You're happy, Dad repeated. Extraordinarily happy. I wake up every morning excited about the problems I get to solve that day. And the money? The money is a byproduct of doing something I love and doing it well. It's also a tool that lets me invest in better technology, hire the best people, and pursue projects that matter to me. Monica, who had been quiet through most of this conversation, finally spoke up. I have to ask, what does this mean for us? I mean, do we even belong here? This cruise probably costs more than we make in a year. The presidential suites you're staying in typically rent for $25,000 per week, I said. But you're my family. You belong here because I want you here. Even after we left you on the dock? Kelly asked, her voice small. Especially after you left me on the dock. Because now you know the truth and we can build a relationship based on who I actually am. Who you actually are, Jason said slowly, is one of the youngest billionaires in America. Who I actually am is someone who loves her family enough to give them a luxury cruise for their anniversary, even after they decided I wasn't successful enough to deserve an invitation. You planned this, Mom realized suddenly. You knew we were booking this cruise. I suggested this cruise to Dad 6 months ago. Sent him a brochure, mentioned how perfect it would be for your anniversary. I wanted to surprise you. You wanted to surprise us by revealing that you own the ship? I wanted to give you the vacation of a lifetime. The reveal was supposed to happen differently, but when you left me on the dock. I shrugged. I adapted. Dad leaned back in his chair, shaking his head in amazement. Our daughter, the secret billionaire. Not secret anymore. What happens now? Mom asked. Do we pretend this conversation never happened? Do we go back to you living in a small apartment and driving an old car? Now you know who I really am. And hopefully you can be proud of what I've built. Proud. Dad laughed, but it was a sound of wonder rather than humor. Jessica, I'm beyond proud. I'm in awe. You've accomplished something I never could have imagined. We all are, Jason added. I just made partner at a regional law firm. You've built a global empire. You've built something meaningful in your field just like I've built something meaningful in mine. The scale doesn't diminish your achievement. It kind of does, Kelly said with a rueful smile. I was so proud of graduating summa cum laude. Now I feel like I'm bragging about my finger painting to Picasso. Don't say that. Education is incredibly important. What you've accomplished in school shows intelligence, dedication, and perseverance. Those are the same qualities that helped me build Maritime Enterprises. Speaking of which, Mom said, I have about 1,000 questions about how you actually did this. We have 6 more days at sea, I said, smiling. I'll tell you everything. Captain Rodriguez returned to escort us to dinner, and as we walked through the ship's corridors, I noticed the way other passengers looked at us, or rather looked at me. Word had clearly spread about the CEO being on board, and I could see the recognition in their faces. Is this what your life is like now? Mom asked quietly, noticing the stares. People recognizing you, knowing who you are? In certain circles, yes. It's one of the reasons I value privacy. When you're worth $6.2 billion, you become a target for all kinds of attention you don't want. But you're happy? She pressed. Really, truly happy? I looked around at my family. These people who had raised me, supported me, and who I loved despite their misconceptions about my life. I'm happy with what I've built. And I'm especially happy that I don't have to hide it from you anymore. To family, Dad said, raising his champagne glass as we entered the ship's most exclusive restaurant. And to daughters who exceed every expectation we never knew we should have. To family, I agreed, and to voyages that bring us closer together. As we sat down to dinner, I realized that sometimes the most important journeys aren't the ones that take you to new places, but the ones that help the people you love see you clearly for the first time. And sometimes, the best way to reveal who you really are is to literally surround your family with the evidence of what you've accomplished. The Ocean Princess would sail for 6 more days, but the most important destination had already been reached: understanding.